The walrus lives near the beaches and the oceans. It has 2 ivory tusks and 4 feet that are used as flippers. The walrus likes to drift along on large pieces of floating ice. A walrus eats clams.
Walrus reads w, w, w. W reads w, w, w.
Wacky the walrus went walking one day. Along came the west wind and blew him away.
Wacky Walrus was very pleased because he was so big. My, but he was huge. He had a great wrinkled body, rolling with fat, and a tough, rough hide. He had whiskers that bristled, and he had 2 enormous tusks hanging down from each side of his mouth. What a fierce-looking creature Wacky Walrus was. Now, might be you wonder why he was called Wacky Walrus. That's such a funny name for a walrus. Well, it seems that when Wacky Walrus was born, his parents were so proud of him, they wanted to give him a very dignified, important sounding name. They decided that Wacklehauser Walrus was a fine sounding name. Wow, Wacklehauser Walrus. That was all right when he was small. However, when he became a young walrus, the name Wacklehauser Walrus was just a wee bit cumbersome. His walrus playmates soon shortened his name to Wacky Walrus. They were not making fun of Wacky Walrus. They just needed a shorter name to call him. Now, Wacky Walrus was big enough for a big name like Wacklehauser Walrus, but everyone was used to calling him Wacky Walrus. It seemed awfully unfriendly to yell, "Hey, Wacklehauser Walrus, come and play with us." So he was still Wacky Walrus to his friends. Wacky Walrus liked some things about being big. No one could push him around. He was just too big. Sometimes, though, he got tired of dragging around his big body. "I wish I were little like you," he said to a grasshopper one day. "Why would you want to be little like me, Wacky Walrus? I think it would be fine to be huge like you. You have no idea how hard life is when you are as small as I am," replied the grasshopper. "You have no idea how hard life is when you're as big as I am. I tell you, it would be wonderful to be small." "Let's change places," said the grasshopper, not really meaning it. "All right," said Wacky Walrus, not really meaning it either. Can you guess what happened? Wacky Walrus did not know how, but he became very tiny. Suddenly wee Wacky Walrus looked up in surprise. What was that enormous foot lying near his head? It was long and thin and green. What kind of creature was this? He looked up and there were gigantic green legs like a grasshopper's, an enormous head with bulging eyes that looked like a grasshopper. Wacky Walrus knew that never in this world had there been such a huge grasshopper. Wacky Walrus decided to move a little farther away. Before that enormous foot slipped and stepped on him, but there was something in his way, a huge boulder, almost the size of a tree. From where had that come? It was not there before. Wee Wacky Walrus had been standing on smooth gravel. Now all around Wacky Walrus, as far as he could see, were large rocks that he could not even climb over. What had happened? Suddenly it began to get dark. Something was blocking the light from the sun. It looked like a huge maple leaf, big and flat. Wee Wacky Walrus screamed furiously to get out of the way. Splat! The big leaf almost missed him. One corner hit Wacky Walrus with a thump on the head. Oh, but he was dizzy. He sat perfectly still for a moment, trying to figure out what had happened. What had caused everything to change? How on earth had everything suddenly gotten too large for him. How had Wacky Walrus changed? He couldn't figure it out at all. The breeze had blown the maple leaf onto wee Wacky Walrus, and it began to swirl around again. It was a playful west wind, the kind that used to tickle his large walrus nose. Now the west wind didn't seem playful. It didn't just tickle his nose. That west wind knocked wee Wacky Walrus right off his feet. Plop! He went down on his stomach. Before Wacky Walrus could even think about standing up, there was a whoosh, and the west wind lifted Wacky Walrus right off the ground. The west wind was carrying Wacky Walrus right through the air. He was so stunned he couldn't believe it. How could the wind pick up a walrus? It was incredible and unbelievable. He knew now what had happened. He had somehow become a wee walrus, and everything else had stayed the same size. Poor Wacky Walrus was being carried around by the west wind. "I thought it was hard to be big," said wee Wacky Walrus. "That was because I'd never tried being tiny. Now that I have tried it, I don't think I like it very much at all. I want to be my right size again." Wee Wacky Walrus wasn't sure just what had happened, but he went plop into a field of tall grass. It wasn't exactly an easy landing because Wacky Walrus was so big again. At least he didn't land on a rock. As Wacky Walrus shook his big head and rubbed his eyes, he saw his small grasshopper friend hopping towards him. Everything was right again. Wacky Walrus was big and the grasshopper was a wee size. "Being big is right for me and being small is right for you. I'm sorry I ever complained," Wacky Walrus said to his grasshopper friend. "You just can't understand anybody else's problems until you've had them." Wacky Walrus looked around him contentedly. "Really, I'm just glad to be me. The size I am, the way I am. It's a mighty good thing just to be satisfied." What was Wacky Walrus's real name? Wacklehauser. Why was he called Wacky Walrus? Because Wacklehauser was a little bit tricky to say, wasn't it? Did Wacky Walrus enjoy being large? Well, he was pleased he was big, but he kind of wished that he was small too. Who wanted to be huge like Wacky Walrus? That's right, the grasshopper did. What surprising thing happened? Yes, Wacky Walrus became very tiny. How did Wacky Walrus feel about being wee and tiny? He was very confused and a little scared, wasn't he? He didn't like it at all. Was Wacky Walrus now in danger? Yes, he was, wasn't he? The wind was blowing him all about the place. More than anything, what did Wacky Walrus want now? Yes, he wanted to be big again. Do you think Wacky Walrus learned to be content? I think he did. I think he learned to be satisfied with just the way he was.
Listen as I tell you a word. Can you hear the W sound? Wow. Can you hear the W sound in wow? Yes, wow has the W sound. Ride. Can you hear the W sound in the word ride? No, ride doesn't have the W sound. Any. Can you hear the W sound in the word any? No, any doesn't have the W sound. Many. Can you hear the W sound in the word many? No, many doesn't have the W sound. Waffle. Can you hear the W sound in the word waffle? No, Waffle doesn't have the W sound. Warm. Can you hear the W sound in the word warm? Yes, warm has the W sound. Most. Can you hear the W sound in the word most? No, most doesn't have the W sound. Wait. Can you hear the W sound in the word wait? Yes, wait has the W sound. Sand. Can you hear the W sound in the word sand? No, sand doesn't have the W sound. Wag. Can you hear the W sound in the word wag? Yes, wag has the W sound. Listen as I read a sentence. Can you find the word that has the W sound? Wow, look at that dog. Can you find the word that has the W sound? Wow, look at that dog. That's right. Wow has the W sound. I like honey on waffles. Can you find the word that has the W sound? I like honey on waffles. That's right. Waffles has the W sound. Does the tail wag the dog? Can you find the word that has the W sound? Does the tail wag the dog? That's right. Wag has the W sound. 7 days make a week. Can you find the word that has the W sound? 7 days make a week. That's right. Week has the W sound. Our bodies need water. Can you find the word that has the W sound? Our bodies need water. That's right. Water has the W sound. Wa, a, wa, a, way. Wa, a, wa, a, wa. Wa, a, wa, a, wa. Wa, e, we. Wa, we. Wa, I, why. Wa, we. Wa, o, whoa. Wa, wa. Let's blend these sounds into words. Wa, a, way. Wa, ache, wake. Wa, a, r, where. Wa, age, wage. Wa, aid, wade. Wa, ate, wait. Wa, aced, waste. Wa, aced, waste. Wa, a, whale. Wa, ag, wag. Wa, a, wall. Wa, a, n, wand. Wa, a, t, what. Wa, a, d, wad. Wa, a, lk, walk. Wa, a, rt, wart. Wa, a, rd, ward. Wa, o, rp, warp. Wa, e, we. Wa, eed, weed. Wa-e-eek, wa-e-eek, week, week. Wa-e-eep, wa-e-eep, weep, weep. Wa-ent, wa-ent, went, went. Wa-est, wa-est, west, west. Wa-eb, wa-eb, web, web. Wa-ept, wa-ept, wept, wept. Wa-et, wa-et, wet, wet. Wa-el, wa-el, well, well. Wa-edge, edge, wedge, wedge. Wa-ide, wa-ide, wide, wide. Wa-ife, wa-ife, wife, wife. Wa-ipe, wa-ipe, wipe, wipe. Wa-in, wa-in, win, win. Wa-ig, wig, wig, wig. Wa-it, wa-it, wit, wit. Wa-il, wa-il, will, will. Wa-ink, wa-ink, wink, wink. Wa-ik, wa-ik, wick, wick. Wo-orn, wo-orn, warn, warn. Wa-or, wa-or, war, war. Wo-oak, wo-oak, woke, woke.
Thou shalt rest in safety. Job 11:18c. Do you ever wish you were bigger? Some things are hard for little people. They cannot see a parade if someone tall stands in front of them. They cannot reach the top shelf of the cabinet. Their legs sometimes do not reach the floor when they sit in a chair. Yes, little people sometimes have a hard time. The Bible tells us a story about a man who was very short. His name was Zacchaeus. Say it with me, Zacchaeus. When Jesus came to the town of Jericho, all the people wanted to see him. They came out of their houses and lined up along the street to see and hear Jesus. This little man Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus, but he could not. Zacchaeus stood there, stretching his neck this way and that way, trying to see around the person in front of him. Every time he moved, the person in front of him moved. Jesus was about to pass, and Zacchaeus still could not see over the crowd. How he wanted to see Jesus. Maybe he pushed a little bit trying to squeeze his way through the crowd. Maybe he looked for a friend who would let him stand closer. Nothing worked. Jesus was going to pass, and Zacchaeus was not even going to get to see him or hear him. Finally, Zacchaeus had an idea. A big sycamore tree was just ahead near the road. I'll run on ahead of the crowd and climb that big sycamore tree. Then I can see Jesus. Quickly, Zacchaeus ran ahead. There were not many people there. If he could just climb the tree quickly, he would get to see Jesus. The crowd was coming closer, he could tell. Zacchaeus may have been worried about his sins and wondered if Jesus could really forgive him. Zacchaeus was an important man. Perhaps he did not want people to know that he had sinned or that he was worried about it. But Zacchaeus knew in his heart he had sinned. Maybe seeing Jesus would help. We don't know whether or not Zacchaeus intended to speak to Jesus. Perhaps Zacchaeus had hoped no one would know he was there. But as Jesus walked along and Zacchaeus eagerly watched him, something happened that Zacchaeus did not expect. Jesus looked up and saw him. Zacchaeus looked into Jesus' eyes and Jesus' love. Then, just think of it, Jesus spoke to Zacchaeus. Jesus called Zacchaeus by his name. Jesus said, "Hurry, Zacchaeus, and come down. Today I want to go and stay at your house." How happy and excited Zacchaeus was. I am sure Zacchaeus did hurry just as fast as he could. Zacchaeus knew Jesus was God and that Jesus could forgive sin. Zacchaeus said, "Lord, I'm going to give half of my money to feed the poor. And if I have taken anything from anyone wrongly, I am going to pay back 4 times what I took." Jesus said, "Today salvation is come to your house, Zacchaeus." And then Jesus gave us one of the most wonderful verses in the Bible. Jesus said, "The Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost." Luke 19, verse 1 to 10. Character objective. Secure. To learn everything I do must be for God. We need to build our everyday lives on eternal things which cannot fail or be lost. A person who trusts in Jesus does not have to worry or fret. He knows God will care for him. He can be satisfied with what God has given him and the way God has made him. You can be sure that God made you just as you are because he wants you to do a job that only you can do. Job 11:18c. Thou shalt rest in safety. Job 11:18c. Thou shalt rest in safety. Job 11:18c. Thou shalt rest in safety. Say it with me. Job 11:18c. Thou shalt rest in safety. One more time together. Job 11:18c. Thou shalt rest in safety.
Walrus reads w, w, w. W reads w, w,